Hey everyone, popping in with a quick note for this week's episode. We're reaching back into the archives to replay one of our most popular shows. We saw how much you enjoyed this one, and the topic is just as important today. We hope you enjoy listening. Welcome again to The Real in Real Estate. I'm here with Chris Kelso, lender extraordinaire. This morning, we're going to talk about interest rates. So, to start off, Chris, would you please give us a little background? Tell us about yourself.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I appreciate being on board here today. My background is being in the mortgage industry about 23 years. Started off in 2021, 2001, actually. Seen a lot of changes over the years, you can imagine. The
Yeah.
debacle in 2008, 2009, the acceleration we had again in 2015, and then the market shutting down in 2020, and the reacceleration back afterwards, and then in the market environment we're in today. So it's always a fun time
A
to be here
roller
in the mortgage
coaster.
and real estate industry. Yeah, there's definitely that roller coaster.
Well, everyone always asks me, as I know they do you, anyone having to do with homes, real estate lending, to talk about interest rates. So I thought, well, that's what we would do today. So um, I know the interest rates are constantly changing. I think I saw last week it was about 7.0. Is that what it was last week?
Correct. That right in the low seven areas. That is correct.
Yeah. So how did we get here? How did we go How'd we go from 2.9, which is never going to happen again, just want everyone to
Right.
know that, to where we're at 7, which historically is not bad at all. But how did we get here?
So I think you have to go back and look at the history. I mean, so when I got in the business, when I actually bought my first home in 1999, my interest rate was at 11% in 1999.
Mm,
And if you notice between 1999 and 2007, right? So we're going back obviously many years right there.
right.
There was a steady decline, right? And so one of the things that happened at that time frame, and thus what happened in 2008 is builders were building a whole bunch, and the Fed was keeping interest rates in check, and they were slowly going down from 11%. And they got down to probably an average of about 5.5, 6%
Mm,
by the, let's say, 2007, 2008 timeframe. There's a lot of market dynamics that took place. Number one is back then we didn't really have the lack of inventory we have today. Look at inventory today; numbers have gone way down.
mm,
Builders are underbuilding nationwide by about 8 million units. We also have a massive increase in our population. Look at our population. Look where it currently stands right now. When I first moved back to the United States, I think in the years of 2000, actually in 1996, our population was hovering around 220 million people, right? We're close to 400 million. And so you start looking at some of these dynamics, and then you go into what happened during COVID, right? So COVID
right.
shuts down the economy. And you have to understand the basics of what takes place on financing. So the mortgage market, and I think this is a great conversation to have. The mortgage market functions the following way: is that a mortgage-backed security is created every time a mortgage is done, and that
Okay.
security is sold in the open market. And
Okay.
it's one of the best securities you can buy out there. They're also known as your different coupons or different notes out there. And a lot of investors buy them because they're considered very secure, right? So you have a lot of investors that are large investors: China, India, Mexico, the United States. We all buy mortgage backed securities, right?
Okay.
So whenever COVID took place in 2020, the rest of the world said, well, why are we going to buy mortgage backed security? We don't know what's going on with the world. So the United States government stepped in and said, we're going to securitize and buy mortgage backed securities. We're going to put them on our balance sheet and we're going to buy them. Now, when you're buying a mortgage backed security, guess what you get to do? You get to choose the rate in which you want to buy them, right? So, what does the government do? The government starts buying mortgage backed securities at a lower rate, which forces down the rates when it comes to a mortgage, basically. And so that's why you were seeing rates in the twos and the threes, because the government was the only one buying them. We were
Mm,
putting on our balance sheet, and we were also buying them at note rates that were really, really low. So by the end of 2000, I'd say the beginning of 2022, the government announced they were going to start tapering their mortgage-backed security market, meaning they were going to buy less and less mortgage-backed securities. And as such, they were going to open them up for the open market to go back in and buy them again. Well, what's the very first thing that happens? When you have a purchaser that is no longer the only purchaser, now you're opening up to the market. Well, in order to sell them, you've got to sell them at premiums, right? You've got to sell them and entice investors to buy them. Well, guess what? Big countries like China and India and Mexico and even the United States, they don't want to buy a security at 3%. They want to buy a security at 5% or 6%, some that moves up. So what happened is that's why rates in 2022 jumped up so much, because the international market came in. Now, here's where, if you ask me, our government did something wrong. At the same time, we stopped buying mortgage-backed securities, also known as a tapering effect. Okay. We
Right.
also started selling off our balance sheet, right? So at the same time that new mortgages were being created, we were also saying, but we're also going to sell off our balance
What we
sheet,
have. Mhm.
what we have, right? Now, let me tell you this. What would you rather buy? Would you rather buy a note that you know for 30 years is going to pay 3%, or a mortgage-backed security that's paying 7% that you know that that note's probably going to get refinanced in the next couple of years? So our government's competing against the new mortgage-backed securities that are being issued, and thus there's not a lot of premium in buying mortgage-backed securities at higher rates right now.
Okay.
So what happens is it causes the market to go up. It causes investors to say, well, I'll buy these mortgage-backed securities, but you got to give me more premium. You got to pay me more for them. Well, if I've got to pay you more for them, I've got to charge higher rates. So the market charges higher rates to create a bigger premium. That's
Okay.
what's going on right now. That's the reason why the market is so out of touch. Now, on the other side of things, we have to look at the supply and demand effect, because everything talks about this supply and demand. What do
Right.
we have right now? We had a very low inventory when we came off this tapering effect, and we're selling mortgage-backed securities. We're lowering our balance sheet. At the same time, there's not enough inventory out there, right? And so
Yeah.
now you have to be able to sell something at a higher interest rate because of the lack of volume that's created out there. So there's a multi-pronged approach that's going on. Add that to the fact that the Fed in 2023, all in 23, they said, you know what, inflation has now gone crazy. And let's face it, inflation has gone nuts right now.
Yeah.
And the Fed has in their mind that they are going to lower inflation to at least 2%. Right now it's covering around 3.8, 3.9%. So they want to lower it down to 2%. So as such, what the Fed did is they said, well, we're going to go ahead and start raising our interim interest rates, which are what money that banks borrow to produce goods, products, services, et cetera, right? And so they went from basically effectively 0 to 5.25 right now.
A
Okay.
heck of a jump.
It's one heck of a jump right there. So now all of a sudden you start seeing the Fed is jumping in and saying, we're not buying mortgage-backed securities, but we are raising the interim rates in which banks are relied to be able to create this area. Now, my personal opinion is they've gone too far. They started too late and they've gone too far, right?
Yeah.
That's just the
Yes.
reality of what happens right there, right? And we can go back and look at history of time, and you can look and see, sometimes I'm going to be right, sometimes I'm going to be wrong. But if you ask me, one of the things that the Fed has done too long is they've allowed rates to go too long. And as such, they're creating sort of a reverse inflation, if you ask me. Because and let's use a widget. Let's not use mortgage as this
Okay.
example, okay? Let's use a widget, okay? So if I'm a company producing a widget, and I know that's going to cost me more money to put that widget into inventory because my borrowing cost is higher, I'm going to produce less widgets, right?
Right.
Well, if I produce less widgets because my carrying cost is too high, that means I've got less inventory to sell, so I can sell it at a higher price, thus inflation. So if you ask me, what the Fed needs to be doing right now is effectively lowering the interim bar interest rates so that national producers on any product or service will start pushing their inventory up, which will start pushing the prices down, which will then curb inflation.
Basic
Right?
supply and demand.
Basic supply and demand. But unfortunately, right now, our government doesn't see it that way. Our Fed doesn't see it that way. They recently came out and said they don't anticipate actually any rate reduction until November at this point. And that next year they might anticipate about 5 to 6 different reductions. So again, it's the typical Fed waiting too long to start and definitely waiting too long to stop.
Stop.
And that's sort of the effects that we're in right now.
So my next question was, what do you see coming? And I think you just answered that. I know this time last year, I think I was talking to someone and they said, well, we should be close to, 5.9 or whatever by the end of the year, this year. I assume you don't see that happening.
So I think rates are going to be very volatile still. And the reason why I think they're going to be very volatile is what I just got through talking about. We don't know what the Fed is looking at doing.
Yeah.
We don't know what producers are willing to do. We see the price of products continue to skyrocket. I'm going to look at something at the most basic, simple thing you can look at, because I believe on these type of podcasts, we have to keep it simple, right? And
Well,
so
simple and short, so we don't lose
simple
anybody.
and short, right? So this is super simple, super short. I used to go down to Crumble Cookie and buy a 4 box of Crumble Cookie all the time, literally all the time. $14, same thing, $14, $14, $14 every Monday. So my staff has a crumble cookie, right? I go in a month ago and I put my card in. It says $16.99. I look up the lady and I said, why am I paying $16? That's a 21% increase in one day from a Monday to the following Monday. She goes, we just went up nationwide. Our prices went up by 21%, right?
Wow.
This is while the Fed is trying to reduce inflation. It's not working.
No.
The reality is you shop just like I do. I don't care if it's crumble cookie, and I'm not trying to this one. I love crumble, by the way. But if you've been in the supermarket, you can't walk out of the supermarket with a full grocery pack anymore for
No.
less than $200. $100 gets you half the price nowadays, right?
Yeah,
So
it's
the reality
crazy.
is inflation is still really bad for the average consumer, and we have to get that in check. But the way the Fed is doing it, if you ask me, they need to start looking at economics a little bit different. We need more widgets to be put in inventory to drive down the cost, and we're not putting more widgets into place. So the costs continue to be driven up.
Right. I did notice, I think it was last week, I read an HAR report. I read a lot of reports, so I'm not sure exactly it was HAR, but the months of inventory for housing was 3.8. So I am seeing an increase of properties coming on the market, but people I think are still hesitating to make the purchase, which in the long run I think is not a great idea because you can always refinance, right, Chris? If the
That is
interest
correct.
rate goes down.
That is correct. And you mentioned 3.8 months of inventory. So let's talk a little bit. Your average listener might not know this, is a balanced market is considered 6 months of inventory.
Yes.
So that's a balanced market, right? An accelerated market is anything less than 4 months. So we're still technically in an accelerated market. Okay.
Yes. It's climbing
hyper
slowly.
accelerated, that is correct. A hyper accelerated market is what we just came out of, which was
Yes.
that 2 months of inventory.
Or
So,
less.
or less. That is correct. The one thing I'm going to say is individuals, we are seeing more applications today than I have in a long time. This year has been a phenomenal year when it comes to applications. Here's the one thing I think that consumers are looking more for is, what do I have to do today to afford to stay in my home so I can afford to refinance 2 years from now? Because I personally think that the refinance boom is going to be more towards the end of 2025 and beginning of 2026.
Okay.
And when rates do go back down, there will be another acceleration because builders are not building enough inventory. That is just the reality. You go to any new community, they are building inventory upon contract, not upon speculation.
Right.
In 2007, it was speculation. Today, it's on contract. So we're going to see another acceleration. So as you mentioned right there, a lot of consumers, I think, have to understand is number one. So you're buying a home in today's market, and let's assume 7%. It might be 6.875. I've been locking at 6.5, but let's assume 7%
Fantastic.
average. Okay.
Okay.
If you look over the history of the United States, since we've been tracking mortgages, the average mortgage rate was actually 7.5%. And if you look over the past 10 years, right, excluding COVID,
Right.
the average interest rate was about 5.5. Okay. So, okay, you're buying a home really for about 1.5 more than what the historical average was. In the grand scheme of things, it's not that bad. Number two, people do not buy homes because of interest rates. They buy them because of lifestyle changes. They're moving up, they're moving down, they're getting married, they're getting divorced, they're having kids, they're becoming empty nesters. They cash out for college education. That is the reality of what's going on today. And so individuals need a place to live. I don't care what city you are, what country you're living in. People have to always have a place to live. And if you're not making an investment in your primary residence, you know who is? Somebody else. And so is the corporate institutions that are putting those in rental pools. So don't be the one who misses out because you think that the rate today is too high. And when you buy that same property 2 years from now, guess what's going to happen? It's not going to be worth that. It's worth a lot more, and you have that appreciation.
Exactly. And what you're doing is putting money in your landlord's pocket instead of yours.
That is
So
correct. Now, if you're an
stop
investor,
that.
hey, you love it.
Yeah. Yeah, but the average person, right?
And now time for a short break.
Hi, I'm Natalie Hartman, and I'm the owner and principal designer of Morph Home Staging and Design. At Morph, we specialize in vacant and occupied home staging, interior design, Airbnb and renovation design, as well as furniture rental for short and long-term rentals, which includes residential properties, assisted living communities, and model homes. For further information on these services that we offer, visit our website at Morph, and that's MORPHE, Home Staging and Design, or you can call us at 281-826-6744. We look forward to transforming your space.
So what are some options for buyers? I obviously buy now and refinance, which people have done forever historically. But are there any other things out there that are available or ideas for buyers that might hesitate at 7 but would go for 6.5?
Here's the one thing. Here's one program that I absolutely love. It's the 2-1 buy down. Okay.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yep,
Okay.
yep. The 2-1 buy down. So the 2-1 buy down, for all those who don't know, is when the seller agrees to contribute money towards a rate buy down. Now, here's why it's really good. So let's assume we're going to use 7% as our baseline.
Right.
So, and the seller wants to offer a contribution. Let's use a 2% contribution. That's the average cost of a 2-1 buy down. So the seller says, hey, I'm selling my home for $500,000. I'm using $500,000 as the number.
Sure.
And
Round
I'm going to
numbers.
give you a 2% contribution towards a 2-1 buy down. So that means your first year, you're going to pay an interest rate of a 5% because it's 2% less. Your second year, you're going to pay an interest rate of 6%. And by the third year, it's going to even out to that 7%. So the reason why I like the 2-1 buy down, number one, it gives you time to build up that payment. So it might be you're newer on the job, your commissions, you've gotten the workforce, might be a whole bunch of different things, or you just want time to hold it out until you can refinance back down in the future, right? And not be at that 7. The other thing is all that money. Let's assume that rates all of a sudden next year go way down. You can refinance and use a portion of that money, that unused portion of that money for that buy down can go towards a rate reduction and or a principal reduction of your property right there. So you don't lose out on the money that you pre-bought that down with right there. So to me, the 2-1 buy down would be what I would suggest. Number one, for somebody to consider. Number two is I'm not a big rate buy down individual, but in certain cases, sometimes prepaying or buying down the interest rate, depending on where the market is, can be something good to look at, right? I had one the other day in which they were looking at a 15-year fix. Well, to buy down on a 15-year fix down to the low 5s was actually not that expensive. It was less than a point. So we went ahead and did that for them. Okay. Where in some cases, buy down sometimes to get that same level on traditional markets would take 2 and 3 points to do so. So the reality is there's never a one size fits all. But I would say this is if I'm out there buying a home today and I look at rates, I would say number one, 2-1 buy down I like a lot, but also don't be afraid to engage about the rate. Rate is unfortunately not that bad. We're not sitting at the 10s. We're not sitting at the 11s, right? We're
Or the
sitting at the
18s.
7s, right? Exactly. We're sitting in the 6s. On average right now, I'm locking almost everything in the 6s. And so in the grand scheme of things, yes, I have to stop making some Starbucks purchases, or maybe I spend less, to going out to eat or something like that. But in the grand scheme of things, I'm going to create equity faster at today's interest rates, even at that point. And to put this in perspective, I do a lot of foreign national lending. I do a lot of lending of individuals from other countries who are buying here, especially Latin American countries, because Spanish is my first language. When the average interest rate in Mexico, for example, is 12%, and they come here and buy, and even on a foreign national loan, I'm giving them 9, they're like, hey, that's golden for me, right?
Yeah.
And so the reality is, taking in perspective this, Latin Americans, for example, know that the best way to create wealth in their generation is through the purchase of a real estate transaction, period, end story, of property. And so you have to understand, if you're going to create generational wealth, it's not about the rate. It's about acquiring the property at the right time, at the right place for the next generation to be able to take advantage of that. And I think that's one of the biggest things we have to continue to speak about out there.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Too bad we can't just repeat that over and over and over to everybody, because that is so true.
Well, hey, that's what this podcast is for. So everybody can repeat it and share it. If you're listening to the podcast, share it. Grab this, share it.
Yes, please do. Well, what else? Anything else that we haven't talked about regarding interest rates that you think people would love to hear right now?
I would say is, the good thing is, if you're a veteran out there, VA loans are the best loans and the lowest interest rates. In fact, my average VA loan right now is in the low 6s. FHA, don't be afraid of them. The FHA loan amount limits went way up this year. So that the average $500,000 home with 3.5% down qualifies for an FHA loan. Again, really good interest rates associated with that. Conventional rehab loans, renovation lending, one-time closes, first-time home buyer programs are still out there. There's still a lot of them that you can take advantage of. Again, my biggest thing is, don't focus on the rate, focus on your lifestyle, and your lifestyle will identify what you can afford. I think that's probably the biggest thing is we are seeing adjustments, and maybe somebody who might be buying a $600,000 home, 2 years ago, now might only buying a $500,000 home today. Hey, guess what? when first-time home buyers are buying $500,000 homes, it's still a pretty good year, by the way.
Yes.
And and that's the reality. I do think what we have to do as a nation, we have to address, I would say, affordability. And what I mean by affordability is not affordability necessarily in rates, even though rates obviously are a function of the market, but affordability in regards to homes being developed in areas in which we drive down a first-time home buyer from being in that $350,000 to $400,000 range back down to having available inventory at the 250 range. I think a $250,000 range is great first-time home buyer. And yes, it might be in the outskirts of any market in which you're building in right there. Here in Houston, Texas, maybe the outskirts of Sealy or Brookshire or Porter, down south, right past Manville. But the reality is I think we have to have more building going on in affordable areas so that we can continue to drive forward that type of thing.
Well, just on a personal note, I have a townhome in Memorial West for $258,000. So
You
that's right
see,
in the wheelhouse. And it's,
that's right in the
yeah,
wheelhouse. And I think that's what we have to see more of. We got to find more of the 250 to 300. It used to be, remember when I got in the business, the average, what was considered a first time home buyer product was about 110, 120, right?
big difference. Yeah.
Back in 2000. So, we're talking about 3 times that amount, but if you do, even if it's double that amount at 250, I think 250 is a good first time home buyer range. So that's what I would like to see all groups and companies and governments go after is what can we do to increase affordability when it comes to housing?
I agree. That's fabulous. One last question here. I don't hear much about ARMs anymore, adjustable rate mortgages. Are those still out there?
They
Are
are
they?
still out there. So an adjustable rate mortgage or an ARM is still out there. The problem is when rates move the way they have and the bond market has moved the way it has moved, ARMs are just not fashionable. Number one is, remember, we already know people are going to refinance out of an ARM over a period of time, right? Well,
Right.
they're also going to be refinancing out of their 30-year fixed right now over a period of time. So there's no value given to an ARM. So most of the time, my ARM pricing is actually higher than my fixed rate pricing.
Okay. Well, good. Those
Now,
were never my favorite anyway.
exactly. And I don't, now we're one of only 3 countries in the world that has fixed rate mortgages, by the way. You
I
go
did
over to
not know
Europe,
that.
yeah, you go over to Europe and everything's an ARM, and you have to renegotiate your interest rate every year. You go back into the bank and renegotiate your new terms, right? That is
Wow.
very common in Europe and other countries. Mexico's the same way. Mexico has a couple of fixed rates, but in general, same exact thing right there. So we're only one of 3 countries that offers a true 30-year fixed rate mortgage. It's just pretty interesting. And again, ARMs are not something I would suggest looking at right now, just because there's no value associated with them, and you're not going to be getting a better interest rate.
Well, based on what you said about Europe and most of the world, no one should be complaining about a fixed rate of 6.5 or 6.7.
That is correct. That
So
is correct.
you mentioned several different types of loans, including first-time home buyers. Do you handle all of that, Chris, at your company?
Absolutely. So there's nothing we don't have, whether it be a traditional mortgage, whether it be a first-time home buyer product like Shinoa or Seth or T-Shack or TDHCA. Those are all great down payment assistance programs that you can put an MCC on top of,
Mhm.
which is a mortgage credit certificate. Great product. We also do a lot of non-QM products. So it might be a bank statement loan for somebody who hasn't filed their taxes, or maybe
Mm.
files their taxes with enough income in there. Foreign national ITN lending. And then we also do a whole bunch of stuff associated, I mentioned renovation lending. So you might have a home that needs to have repairs
Right.
or improvements that you want to make to it. Renovation loans or a one-time close because you're building a home on your property. We have a cash buy program in which you're looking at buying a new home, but you don't necessarily have your old home sold yet. We can buy that new home in cash. You move into it, and then we sell your home post-closing and do delayed financing for you. So that's a
Wow,
pretty cool
that's
product. So
fabulous.
absolutely. So we have a lot of different products out there that you can actually take advantage of. And for all of our foreign buyers as well, maybe Latin Americans, I tell everybody also is we are very Latino based as well. We love helping all of our minority and underprivileged communities, whether that be the Black or Brown community. And we do a lot of lending around that, some special programs. And Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae have continued to put some great products out there. There's a specific product right now in which you can qualify for up to $10,000 worth of closing costs if
Wow,
you're in the right area, if you're Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac approved. That's sort of a series of things right there. So we have a lot of people qualifying for some of those products as well.
that's great. And I heard you speak one time, a little off the subject, but you also know about reverse mortgages.
Oh, one of my favorite products. So I tell everybody my 2 favorite products that I absolutely love. Number one being a VA loan. Thank you very much to our men and women of our
Absolutely.
military. We would not be having this podcast, right? If it wasn't for
Without them, that's right.
so number one, VA lending is my ultimate passion right there. Number two, reverse mortgage. So this is for seniors over the age of 62. It is an equity driven product. So you have to have equity in your home based on your age. It's not credit driven though, and it's not debt to income ratio driven. So it's pretty cool. A lot of our seniors right now are definitely suffering when it comes to inflation.
Inflation,
And
yeah.
so a reverse mortgage, I've got one for my parents, for example. My mom's been on a reverse mortgage for 10 years. It allows individuals to stay in their home, not make a mortgage payment, get a line of credit if they want to right there. But really, it's a cash flow management tool. It allows seniors to take advantage of cash flow, and you can use a reverse mortgage for the purchase. We also have some of our seniors who say, well, I don't want to sell because I can't sell and buy a new home in cash. You don't have to. Under a reverse mortgage, you could sell, put 50% down or 60% down and do a reverse mortgage for the difference right there. You know, especially if you're the age of 62 or 72 in those ranges. And so it's a flow management tool. And if more of our seniors would take advantage of it, or at least take advantage of listening to somebody like
I
me
know
about
that.
how it can benefit you, it's amazing. I literally had a lady today come up to me. She was in my office right before this podcast and said, Chris, the reverse mortgage has been the best thing you've ever done for me. I've had it in place for about 9 years now. It has absolutely saved my life during COVID, and more importantly, post-COVID, when inflation has been as rampant as what it was. So to all of our seniors out there, if you need to get more information, I'd love to sit down and talk with you. I'm a face-to-face guy, but reverse mortgage is absolutely one of my favorite products.
And don't be afraid to call Chris, because all the myths that you hear about reverse mortgages, they're just myths. They're not going to come take your house. Really, you need to find out what's going on.
That is true. That is true. And that is a big myth, by the way. So the two biggest myths to go over, number one is that the bank owns your home. And so I tell everybody is, if you have a mortgage on your home, who technically owns it? I don't care what product you are. The bank
It's the
always
bank.
owns your home. That's correct,
Yeah.
right? And then number two is you own the home. It functions just like a traditional deed of trust. So you own the property. You can sell the property. We have clients that buy and sell into reverse mortgage all the time and swear by them. The reality was, though, if you go back to when a reverse mortgage first came into play in the 80s, and it wasn't necessarily mature at that time, that the actuaries didn't get it right. There was a lot of issues that took place at the beginning of the 80s and 90s. And then I hate to say this is, Tom Selleck and William Shatner ruined the reverse mortgage industry, because if you're being sold a reverse mortgage at 2 a.m. in the morning by one of those two, those companies
Not a
were
good
taking
idea.
advantage of you. That is
Not a
correct.
good idea.
And so in 2017, the US government came in and slapped all those companies. That's why you don't see those advertisements anymore. They
Yeah.
took all those excessive fees out of the market. So the individuals who were going to close on a reverse mortgage and paying $30 and $40 and $50,000, those days are gone. No more. And so
Yeah.
that was needed in the industry.
Okay, get the facts. That's what this podcast is all about. Chris, if someone wants to call you about anything we've talked about today, how do they reach you?
Best way is always on my cell phone. It's always on for you, 713-256-9138. Or you can actually go to my website. And my website's super easy. It's just New American Funding /Chris Kelso. Or you can also email me at chris.kelso@NAF Inc. That stands for New American Funding, nafinc.com. But as always, my cell phone, that's the best way. You can text me, you can reach me. Got everything on there, 713-256-9138.
And we will have all of that information at the bottom of the podcast. Anything else before we sign off? I really appreciate everything you've said, all the time you've taken to be with us.
No, I would just say is don't be afraid to engage in the market. I think we have a lot of first-time home buyers out there that are still a little afraid. People think you have to have 20% down in the market. You don't have to have 20% down in the market. People think that rates are, sitting at the 8s and 9s. They're not. They're sitting on average on the 6s right there. And choose somebody that you trust, like, and know. I think that's the best thing. Hopefully it's me, but if it's not,
That's
find
why you're
somebody.
on here.
Yes, but if not, find somebody you know, like, and trust, and make sure that you leverage that relationship. It's very important. Going online, I see so many people that go online because they think, hey, guess what? I can press a button and get a mortgage. Then they
No,
get busted out, 2 days later. Don't do that.
no.
Make sure you're doing the right thing, and get pre-approved up front. That's
Yeah.
the biggest thing. Make sure that you get all the information and get pre-approval up front.
Thank you so much, Chris. And it's always best to sit down with your mortgage person in person. So please give Chris a call if you have any questions whatsoever. And thank you so much, Chris, for your time.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much for letting me be on here.
Thank you for tuning in to the Real and Real Estate Podcast. I hope today's insights have inspired and empowered you. Don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and share the podcast with anyone who might benefit. Have questions or a topic you'd like us to explore? We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, stay informed, stay inspired, and keep moving towards success.